But
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Let me know when you're ready. And
Arlene is saying that she's in the Zoom. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
there's something in that. I'll tell you what, why don't, I'm going to throw this over to IT to see if he can work on that, and then we'll get started with the rest of the meeting.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. I can hear you. Nitha, I can hear you.
Thank you. Arlene just sent me a text, a message saying that she is in the Zoom. I wonder if she has I'm going to resend her the correct.
Yeah, because I see on my screen, I see 7 participants.
Oh, okay. So you see them
Bottom. I don't see her, but I see the number is 7.
Yeah, there's admin. Okay, so maybe they have the wrong link. I'm going to send them again. Actually, Annalisa is the one. I'm going to resend her the Zoom link.
She's logged in as a attendee.
Oh, you see her?
Yeah, I see her. If you look at if you click on participants, there's 6 panelists and 3 attendees, and Annalisa Vargas is logged in as an attendee.
Okay, you know what? I can't actually. Okay, oh, you're right about that. Yeah, so you're right about that. Commissioner Chris is there, and Miguel is there as well. Okay, so there's our Annalisa is here.
Yeah.
So we need to get Pete over as a panelist as well, because he's a commissioner. There we
Hi,
go.
Annalisa.
Hi, good afternoon or good evening.
Hi.
Great. All right, we're good to go.
All right, so it's 5:33 p.m. I'll call to order this Sustainability Commission meeting. And with that, we will do roll call. Sarah, can you call them out?
Chair Benson,
Here.
Vice Chair Liu,
I'm here. I'm here. Thanks.
Commissioner Tack,
Here.
Commissioner Chris.
Yes, ma'am, here.
All right, thank you. And with that, we will go to the Pledge of Allegiance. I always hate how to start this. So let's go ahead. 1, 2, 3. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
And to the
republic of which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everybody. And with that, we will open the floor to public comment. Is there anybody who would like to address the commission?
I don't see anybody at this time, but there was a comment for us to wait a little bit longer in case there is someone who does want to comment on some of our items. So we're going to give this a second to see if anyone raises their hand.
Sure.
And I don't see any public comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So moving on to agenda item number 4, the minutes. I'm going to abstain from this because I wasn't at this meeting. But is there a motion on the floor regarding the minutes?
Motion to approve minutes as constituted.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. Anybody have any comments on the motion? All right, there's no comments on the motion. We'll go to vote. If you can do Sarah, if you can go through the voting process, please.
Chair Benson,
Abstain?
Vice Chair Liu,
Approve.
Commissioner Tack,
Approve.
Commissioner Chris.
Approve.
All right, thank you. 3-0 with 1 abstention. Vote motion passes. Thank you. Move on to item number 5, presentations. I will give the floor to Annalisa.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here, and it's great to present to the Sustainability Commission. My name is Annalisa Vargas, and I am a community organizer with Communities for New California. And part of our work is also, we are part of the Community Steering Committee. So I'm here as a representative of our AB 617 Steering Committee member. And so this environmental justice in the Coachella Valley is something that's been in the making for many years. Back in, just to give you a little background, very brief, we were nominated as a community to be selected for AB 617. In December of 2019, we were selected, and then the work began in January of 2020. As you can imagine, with the pandemic, we met in person the first time around, but since February or March of 2020, we have met virtually. And so here are some of the, as you can see here, South Coast AQMD. I don't know if we have the presentation or if you have it, the slides.
I have the slides. Give me
Okay,
one second, I'll bring it up.
Okay, perfect. And just to give you an idea, we'll be talking about an intro to AB 617, what the purpose is. You can go to the next slide. So our purpose, what are our projects in the Eastern Coachella Valley, partnering with cities and Eastern Coachella Valley communities, some of our results, and some invitations for you, and also some supplemental information for the city of Indio. You can go to the next slide. So as you can see here, AB 617 is an assembly bill focused on community air initiatives, and it's a community-focused program to monitor and reduce air pollution in environmental justice communities. And part of it is they're identifying communities that have been overburdened and severely impacted by pollution, by different contaminants. And so that is why our community was identified and then selected. It's based on priority. It's based on cumulative impact burden. So again, we were selected in year 2. So like I mentioned, in 2019, and the South Coast Air Quality Management District is actively working in the community, like I mentioned, since 2020, and creating this community-based effort with our steering committee being the group that is leading this. And providing that feedback and constant, communication. We used to meet monthly, now we meet quarterly as a CSC, and ultimately it's to improve our air quality and public health in our Eastern Coachella Valley communities. And as you can see there, we're focusing on regulation. So what are the strategies? Some of regulations, targeted air monitoring, enhanced enforcement, interagency collaboration, exposure reductions, incentives, and public information and outreach. So it's very multifaceted and program. You can go to the next slide. And also this program is an 11-year commitment. So CARB, California Air Resources Board, and there's funding that comes through the state, but it's an 11-year commitment ultimately. So part of the work is, it's going to take some time, right? We've just sort of moved from the planning to sort of our beginning the implementation. And these, as you can see here, are the cities and boundaries. So it's portions of the city of Indio, the entire city of Coachella, and the unincorporated communities of Thermal, Mecca, Oasis, and North Shore. And this is a flyer. There's a flyer there. Next slide. And so our community air monitoring plan that was developed just gives you some idea here of the locations of the monitoring stations and air quality sensors, and also who they're operated by, what pollutants are being monitored, and added monitors. So part of our plan, we've identified additional air monitors in specific locations. So that's currently happening. And so those are some of the added monitors and the pollutants they'll be monitoring based on need and identification during this process. Next slide. And so our community emissions reductions plan. So we have our air monitoring monitoring plan, which is the CAMP, and then we have our community emissions reduction plan, SERP. And they're both available online. They're very large documents. We're just giving you some of the highlights. And part of the priorities that we've identified as a CSC is the Salton Sea, pesticides, open burning, fugitive dust, diesel, and green leaf power plant. Next slide. And so part of our work is partnering. We have, as I mentioned, the SERP states that AQMD and the CSC will collaborate, build these collaborative partnerships within the cities, and also tribes and the County of Riverside and other partners and stakeholders to reduce emissions such as restrict unnecessary public access, so to unpaved roads or areas where off-roading takes place, which we know happens a lot here in these, especially in the unincorporated areas, and also things like installing signs, physical barriers, reducing speed limits on unpaved roads, identifying funding to plant natural vegetation, perhaps like native plants, and unpaved surfaces that are no longer being used as roadways, and also stabilizing loose road surfaces with grading and gravel, and identifying funding to expand street sweeping services just beyond the service area. So we have communities that currently don't have that, particularly that you see that in the unincorporated communities. Next slide. And so we are very excited to be here today. And one of our goals is to continue, working on this goal on our cleaner air. But we really want, to build these partnerships with the city so that, and align it with your plans. And later I'll talk about that a little more. But as you can see, there are many plans already in, that are happening as we're conducting this work. Some of them are the regional and neighborhood mobility plan for the Eastern Coachella Valley. And so the Eastern Coachella Valley's plan action for climate resilience, the City of Indio's transformative climate communities plan, dust suppression action plan, and the City of Indio sustainability plan, the Salton Sea management plan, and the Coachella Valley extreme ozone state implementation plan. So these are all things that we are collaborating and our goals align. And so it's great that we're talking. The important here thing is that we need to be able to communicate, right, and continue these collaborations and just make them stronger so we can see the results that we need. Next slide. So for example, the Pavement project incentive. So I won't go verbatim because it's a lot of information and details. So, and we don't have a lot of time, but just giving you the overall budget, which was 4.57 million for our community air protection incentive funding. We know that there'll be other cycles of funding coming through, but in this cycle, we have we had the status of CARB approval of our incentive projects were submitted and they've gotten approved. Particularly, I'll just mention those like the paving project. So again, this is the process. So just to kind of give you a snapshot of how the process took place once this was prioritized, and now it's going to be an implementation project focusing on some of these areas where there's like unpaved roads. Some of our identified some of like the Polanco mobile home parks in like thermal Mecca Oasis communities. Next slide. And so yeah, this was the scoring criteria that they used to determine like project readiness and other criteria in making this decision for the paving project. Next slide. And another project is our air filtration incentives program that will ultimately be able, where residents in, it'll be a first come, first serve. I don't know based on the funding, like how many, but it's estimated for 1,500 to 2,000 homes. So it's 937,000 was budgeted, and we still don't have the details how that's going to look or what is the application, things like that. But we're very excited to begin the outreach and start letting the community know that this is coming up and just getting them ready for when that does happen, that we have, we'll make sure to get those air filters to our communities, primarily, those that are most impacted. Next slide. And some of our results. This is relative to the SERP. And again, it's a lot of info, but essentially, we want to uplift that the 30.2 million that's been allocated for our incentive projects, and through through this this particular funding. Again, there'll be other cycles. We're hoping that the amounts of funding would be increased to our area. And so that is something that we will continue to advocate in behalf of, and as we go through the SERP, and when there are those opportunities to, for these projects. And then rules and regulations that have been adopted, and also just some of the outreach work that we've done, particularly with Department of Pesticide Regulation, also the EPA. Next slide. And so continuing our results, again, this is between 2020 and 2021, just to give you a snapshot of our work. So this is focusing on the monitoring working team that they've discussing the areas and where they would place these these air monitors, and also looking at partnerships with CARB, DPR, and Office of Environmental Health and Hazard Assessment, and also the Riverside County Ag Commissioner, to address our concerns related to pesticides. So that was a lot of our discussions. We talked about that, and so we were able to begin AQMD or South Coast AQMD to begin these conversations. So we're happy to say that we're moving on our goals. We're doing well. We haven't. There hasn't been anything like alarming or red flags regarding our progress. Next slide. And these are some of our 2022 highlights that, our Salt and Sea meetings that were attended, just making sure that people understand what is going on with the Salt and Sea, and just, updates regarding some of the projects that, especially around dust suppression, and letting the community just having the opportunity to get more engaged. And then our paving project plan, some of the items like the budget working team. So we have working teams that work specifically. We have our air monitoring working team, the budget working team, and then the outreach working team, with which Anita and I are both members of. And so it's really something that has been evolving, and I feel like finally now we're starting to move a little faster, right? We're maybe going like 5-10 miles an hour. Now we're kind of like 15-20 miles an hour. So we're steadily reaching our goals. Next slide. And some more highlights. Like I said, I don't really want to overwhelm you with information. At your leisure, you can review some of this. And if questions pop up, please feel free to reach out to us. And also, we really want to hear from you also as it relates to, like I said, aligning some of the goals that you have in the city of Indio. And then also, as we're implementing and doing the work, that we continue, having conversations, or if it's just popping into the CSC, And, or even if it's a working team meeting, we'd be so honored to have you join us. Next slide. And this is just some of what I was just mentioning, right? If you're welcome to come to our quarterly meetings. Our next meeting will take place October 27th, and it'll be from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then we will provide you with contact info so that you can communicate with Arlene directly. And if you have any questions, and just maybe there's something that you want to present to the CSC and let us know about something that you're doing related to air quality, be happy to put that on the agenda. So things like that is also part of what we're doing, and also communicating the incentives to our residents via community city websites and newsletters. So we're also relying on you as an outlet to then communicate when we have some of these projects that can benefit our families and communities. And next slide. So there are some contact information here. Our community liaison, Arlene Farrell, is her, there's an email, as you can see, but then there's also specific individuals. I would say Arlene's like the first point of contact, but if you have questions about the SERP, Pedro, there's his contact, or the camp, and or any compliance. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't go too fast, but I hope I didn't go over time as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Annalisa. That was a very nice presentation. Appreciate it, taking your time. Does anybody have any questions for her at this moment?
Arlene did raise her hand. IT, can you let Arlene in as a participant? Thank you.
Go ahead, Arlene. You have a question?
Just wanted to say thank you to Annalisa and Anita. This is Arlene Farrell, representing South Coast AQMD. And Anita and Annalisa have been instrumental community members for our AB 617 program. Again, as Annalisa highlighted, these are just some of the works that we do. And so again, it's just a way of really bringing what we do as agency, as government, and really bridging the communities. And so I won't hold up any more time. Annalisa did a fabulous job. We're here to support the community from AQMD. If you all have any questions, we would be happy to answer it. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. I have a couple of quick questions, if I may take a moment to put them out there.
Sure.
So why are you focused mostly on the eastern part of the valley and not the western part of the valley?
Definitely. Good question. So the AB 617 program has been put together since 2017. The ECV community was nominated and selected as a community. So basically the Eastern Coachella Valley nominated themselves as a community, and they were then selected at that time. So we have currently 6 different communities from counties of Los Angeles, Orange County, Riverside, San Bernardino, and the ECV community specifically identified themselves as having these specific air quality issues. And so they were then selected to be part of this program.
So it wasn't that any governing body or any data specifically stated that the eastern part of the valley needed more attention. It was that part of the valley said they wanted more attention. Is that how I understand it?
So that's actually the first part of it. Is we go through our Cal Enviro screens, and through there we identify which communities do have the most polluted air. And so based on that, as well as the various communities nominating themselves, we then recommend that to the California Air Resources Board. So it's actually a combination of both those things. Good question.
All right. And why is it not that in your presentation there was not any discussion about vehicle emissions?
So that is actually one of the priorities on one of the slides. I think Annalisa identified what the 6 priorities are, saltancy, pesticides being 2 of the ones that she discussed, also fugitive dust. And then there's also a portion there on diesel. So vehicle emissions is part of the plan. We just haven't created specific projects or programs specifically on vehicle emissions, but we're doing a lot of that in our Los Angeles communities, which directly affects what happens in the Eastern Coachella Valley.
So, and that leads to my follow-up with that. So, and it's not just diesel emissions that are causing issue with air quality. It's also just regular gasoline combustion car emissions, but LA and Orange County. So since most of the prevailing winds move west to east, it's a safe thing to say that a lot of the vehicle emissions from LA and Orange County do pass through and end up coming through our communities here. Is that when you're saying you're working on that, on the vehicle emissions for the future? Is that part of it that you're going to work on?
Yeah, definitely. We're looking at some of the, and we haven't laid it out here yet in the SERP, in our community emission reduction plan, but it is in there. We just haven't highlighted it yet for our annual report. But yes, we're working with the ports in the Los Angeles and Long Beach communities who are also part of this AB 617 program. We're working on alternative fuels, where we're talking about some alternative trucks going from west to east, as you mentioned. So there are continuous projects that are happening at this moment. We just didn't mention them as part of this plan for Eastern Coachella Valley.
All right, thank you. And I have 2 more questions. So
Yeah, no problem.
you had the 8 meetings for the monitoring stations. Did you determine where they're going to go at this time, or are you still trying to figure that out?
Yeah, so the monitoring working team, again, is a subset. You've met Annalisa and Anita here are part of the outreach working team. So they have selected locations within the Eastern Coachella Valley already, and they have actually deployed 7 of those sensors. And so we're working directly with community members to identify those locations. But even till this day, like, we're still accepting locations that can help identify where we can fill in the gaps in the data. Yes, we're always welcome to input. If you think there's a part of the Eastern Coachella Valley that we should be monitoring a little bit more closely. This community has identified a lot of the Salton Sea region for monitoring. And we have a project coming up where we're working with 29 Palms EPA and the Desert Healthcare, again, to identify some locations of where to put some of these sensor networks. We're trying to expand our sensor network.
Okay, so you said, I just want to make sure I understand what you said. So you have established 7 monitoring stations, and you're open to more monitoring stations if the community tells you there's another place to put a station. Is that right? Right.
And I don't know, I hope I'm not misspeaking. I think it's sensor network. So we did put 7 monitoring stations, and now we're trying to expand our sensor network. So we're working on putting more sensors out, and we're trying to identify some of those sensor locations.
Copy that. Thank you. And my last question, and again, sorry to monopolize this.
No, that's great.
So since we live in a desert with lots of sand and everything surrounding us, how did you determine, and I'm not against paving roads, and especially in communities that need paved roads, but how did you determine that paving of roads is such a priority when one can anecdotally say that most of the dust that gets in the air in our community comes from our surrounding desert areas?
Good question. And I tell this to Annalisa and Anita all the time. I'm not the technical person, but I believe there have been some health studies on the dust that's happening there. This just happens to be one of the projects that we are moving forward with as far as the paving project. That's just one of the what should we say, actions that are in the SERP. And so these are just one of the strategies of ways to work on that dust suppression. So we're also working with Salton Sea and CNRA, other agencies to work on the surrounding areas. So we are very much involved in, you know, a lot of the Salton Sea workshops and the communities, understanding that the dust comes from all over and not just this one centralized area. And so I know they have some dust suppression plans that are in action, doing some other mitigations. And so we are working closely with the other agencies as they try to navigate through some of the dust in the surrounding areas.
All right, thank you very much. Does
Yeah,
anybody, sorry, anybody else have any other questions? All right, if nobody else has any other questions, I want to again thank Arlene and Annalisa for coming in today, and I appreciate your time. And Sarah, if you can make sure to send that presentation document to all the directors or commissioners, excuse me, that would be great.
Yes, please do send that. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to note that in the very last part, I didn't go over this section, but there is linking the Indio General Plan 2040 to the SERP. And so you'll see there where they align. So as you're working on your plans, implementing them, you can see Anita did a great job on that. So I'll give her all the credit, to her for doing that. And so I just think that's a great tool. Then you can monitor as you're doing work. And like I said, check in with the CNC and say, hey, just want an update on this item. How are you guys doing? We're doing this, you know, so also just another way to continue the dialogue and partnership. Thank you so much.
It is a moving target. Just a comment that it is a moving target. I think the general plan 2040 is being updated, right? Does anyone know? Sarah or any of the commissioners know? I believe India's general plan is up for another update. But we'll just have to keep looking at the changes as they occur.
All right, thank you very much. If nobody else has any comments, Annalisa, we'll let you go. You have a great night. Stay safe and appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you. Have a great night as well.
Thanks, Annalisa. Thanks, Arlene.
All right, with that, we'll move on to item number 6, SB 1383. And Sarah, you have the floor.
I have a couple of updates for 1383. Several months back, we heard from Margaret from Energia about doing possibly having a different place to take our 1383 waste, maybe to Valley Sanitary or another wastewater treatment plant, possibly Coachella. Kind of thinking about opening up those opportunities just as possibilities for our 1383 organics. And actually, the Indio Water Authority and the Valley Sanitary District already have a JPA or an MOU. It's called the East Valley Reclamation Authority. And they work together mostly for recycled water or new water sources. But they just passed a resolution in the last month on September 6th that will allow them to talk about commercial food waste diversion programs as an appropriate activity for that organization as well. So that's a step forward in possibly opening up that opportunity for our 1383 organics. I also wanted to let you know that we did receive the grant funding for 1383 implementation. The city received approximately $121,000. We can use it for outreach. We can use it to buy equipment if we need it, things like that. We haven't yet allocated the funding. We might consider those little food buckets for inside people's kitchens. So that's going to be another opportunity that just opened up as well. We did get approved for those funds. And that's all I have for the general updates.
Did whatever happened to when we talked about the food waste for people's kitchens, the stickers for the trash bins with Burtec to put it on the bins, the new bin, replacement bins moving forward, new bins and new developments moving forward, and put them on existing bins in people's homes to clarify what goes in what bin and adding the food waste from the kitchens to that. Whatever happened with that? Because I don't recall.
It is
talking
still
about that.
ongoing. It's not, it hasn't gone away. I think right now you'll see the stickers often or always on the new bins that go out, but they've been more or less focused on that versus putting the stickers on the older bins, but that is rolling out.
So we do have stickers on new bins going out that detail everything about all that. Okay, cool.
Yes, there's a picture as well as writing. Yes.
All right, cool. Because I was recently in Seattle and saw stickers on their bins, and I was reminded that we haven't talked about that in quite a while. All right, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Sarah regarding the updates to SB 1383? All right, if nobody has any questions.
Sorry,
Okay.
I have to keep turning off my background because I'm in a public place. My sound, my volume. Can you send out that information that you just, I think I got it, just to make sure that I got the new organization that you said was founded, and the change in scope of their responsibilities on this food waste. If you can send that out, I'd appreciate it. Save me Googling and finding the wrong thing.
You got it.
Anybody else have any questions or comments for Sarah? Or if nobody else has any comments or questions, move on to 6.2, the true certification review. Sarah, the floor is still yours.
Okay, this is ultimately Vice Chair Lou's work, and I'm going to pass it over to her.
Alrighty, thanks. So Commissioner Chris and I were asked to look at the true waste certification as an option for accelerating compliance with this SB 1383 program. So I did quite a bit of the heavy lifting and then sent it to Commissioner Chris to review. So he might have some comments also. I'll let him add those as we go along. But I'll give you the, as I say, bottom line up front. So if you would go to the next slide, please. So the objective was to determine, and tell me if it's too loud in here. The objective was to determine if we should promote this true waste certification, which is really a zero waste program. And it's sponsored by this Green Building Council for adoption at commercial facilities. The true waste certification is only available to commercial facilities. It's not for residential homes. And it will assist the facilities to be sustainable, lower their waste bills, and facilitate compliance with SB 1383, which requires waste recycling, organic waste collection that you were just talking about, use of larger waste bins, more frequent pickup, and higher waste disposal costs. I don't know if it's that significantly higher, but it's a little bit higher. What is true waste? The true acronym stands for Total Resource Use and Efficiency certification offered by the U.S. Green Business Council. It is an independently audited zero waste goal of diverting all solid waste from the landfill and even incineration and the environment. So it's pretty heavy lift. Next slide, please. So in looking at this, in analyzing this, first looked at the objective, which we talked about, which I just mentioned, the alternatives to the true certification, which was to promote this zero waste program for the commercial facilities. Either we give them some benefits, say, okay, if you do true certification, you get some benefit, or you promote it and say, just do it because it's good, or you don't promote it, or we promote something else. So in order to figure out which way to go, I looked really at the implementing factors, the regulations, what was the cost of the facility, what was the cost of the city, what were the sustainability benefits, any barriers to implement this true certification, then rank those 4 alternatives, promote, give benefits, without benefits, don't promote. So we rank them, and then now we're here at the purple circle, which is for you to review this and ultimately make a decision one way or the other, a recommendation, I guess. Next slide, please. So these are the questions considered, just to break it down a little bit further. What are facilities, what do they have to do for the SB 1383 rule? There is also the state, that's the state regulation, and then there's the city ordinance. So I went through that. I won't go through every kind of detail on that. What's the expected cost for the certification? How many facilities do we think will sign up for it, which is a wild guess. And the compliance deadline, should we talk to facilities about this true certification before rolling out this program? What's the cost if we don't comply? What are cities required to do for SB 1383? What does Indio have to pay in terms of penalties if the city doesn't comply? Because I understand that we're going to be inspected by Cal Recycle. And what's the process? What is the whole process involved with true certification if we're recommended it and have other cities adopted this program? So those were all the factors considered. There is you can see this is 23 pages. There's a much longer document behind this that answers each of those questions. And I won't go through them unless you want me to. But the thought is today, I just let you know that those were the questions that were looked at. You can either tell me, go ahead, go through all 8 of them, or take the document, look at it, and then come back next month and make your decision. So next slide, please. The final recommendation after going through all of those things, which I won't go through unless you say go ahead, is that the recommendation that I kind of come up with, just the logic of it, seems you promote this true certification with incentives, as it's more advantageous than not offering any incentives or not offering the program at all. Next slide, please. And why is that? And there were a couple of other recommendations. The bottom line on why is because before I go to this, the information on this side is there's a pretty substantial fine, as you will see in the other material that I won't go through. I don't remember all the numbers. If the city does not, I think it's like $10,000 per day per facility. So there's a huge penalty that can be incurred by the city. The penalties that the city of Indio can assess on facilities, it's not that significant, I don't think, but the city really has an incentive. However, to get to zero waste, when we look at barriers to implementing this program, the city has to have the infrastructure. Now, Sarah mentioned a little bit of that at the beginning, to be able to allow a commercial facility to get to zero waste. You have to minimize your waste on the front end. You have to be able to either have that, what would normally be waste, reused somewhere else, or repurpose, change your process. So, it's just such a heavy lift that, I just figured maybe 10 facilities out of think a couple hundred might, because there wasn't widespread adoption of it that I could see. So maybe 10 facilities out of a couple hundred, I forget how many total, will adopt this program. And so there would be a net savings, but the difficulty is getting a facility to implement this. We would have to offer something substantial, such as you don't get violations if you implement this program, because to be quite honest, just to be a realist here, unless a facility has some sort of a corporate mandate, they'll need additional people to do this. So one of the encouragements that we might be able to give them also is a little bit of consulting support or some help and guidance. The other recommendations that resulted from it was to boost SB 1383 information on the website and the ordinance, distribute the information by email, continue to track compliance status with the ordinance. The city has been out doing that. Get input from the business, provide on-site guidance and evaluation for facilities, get them over that hurdle of not knowing anything. Because if this is not your line of business and someone just walks up to you and say, do zero waste, there's no way you're gonna take money out of your pocket to invest the time to say, what does it take for me to do that? You know, that's a big barrier. So if we can help them overcome that hurdle, maybe we can get them moving. Provide online guidance also, and consider other incentives in addition to TRUE, such as, if you do an 80 to 90, maybe rather than go zero, ease up a little bit and offer another alternative of 80 to 90% waste diversion. Maybe those facilities don't get as inspected as often. And maybe the TRUE waste people, they don't, some sort of enforcement discretion is used if a can ends up in the blue bin versus the brown bin, something to that effect. So I think the next slide is all of the background on this that goes into the details and all of the numbers. So, commissioners, your thoughts? What, go ahead.
Well, before we get into that, Commissioner Liu, thank you very much for that presentation. Thank you for putting together that slideshow. I went through it earlier. Before we get into that, you said that you have us look at it and go through it and come back next month. Do you want to do that, or do you want our input today and our questions today?
I think it would be good to air any questions that you have today, if you have some, so that additional research can be done by the next time we meet. But since we did not get this out, had we gotten this out 3 or 4 weeks ago, it would be appropriate to ask for a vote on it. But this large package just went out about 2 days ago. So I think it's better to give folks a little time to look at it and come up with more questions. If you don't, do you have any?
I have a couple.
Yes, go ahead.
But I might have a few more in a month's time. So I do think we should take the month before next meeting to delve into this more and come up with some more details and maybe some more constructive criticism if anybody has that. And I want to clarify and reiterate, constructive criticism is something that we're all looking for here. So a couple of questions is why this certification? Why TRUE certification versus because there's lots of other green certifications out there for businesses to get on their own, so they can kind of use that as, implement as a corporate culture and use it as a marketing tool to obtain customers. So why would this system with the U.S. Green Building Council be the one that we should consider over anything else?
I don't think that is that's not the way that I'm presenting it, because that's the one that Sarah asked us to look at. So in my,
That would be
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I brought the true certification because ultimately when I looked into zero waste certifications like you're talking about, there are a couple of them, but I understood that to kind of be the standard, the industry standard for the certification. And also because it is backed up by the Green Building Council. And they also do LEED. They've done a lot of these types of certifications, and that added a lot of, I think, value to it as well. So that's why I brought forward this specific certification. I feel like because it is the industry standard and it's backed by the Green Building Council, that this would be probably the one that to look into first, at least. Oh, and I would also like to say that we have our economic development manager with us today, Miguel Ramirez Manejo. And he works with the chamber, he works with businesses. So I asked him to attend the meeting, to be here to listen to this part as well, to kind of consider what our commercial folks might consider as well. Thank you, Miguel.
Yeah. Can I ask a question, Sarah?
I have a couple more real quick. If I can get through mine, and I'll give the floor to you, Commissioner Tack, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. So you mentioned in the depth of the presentation that some businesses would be exempt from this. I can't find it right now, but it was something like there was 850 businesses that were eligible, and with exemptions, it dropped it down to 150 that would actually participate. What, if you can, real quick, what makes a company exempt from this?
I also sent those numbers to Vice Chair Liu, and mainly you can be exempt because you have a certain amount of a threshold of waste that you're under. So we had a lot of insurance companies, even automobile places that don't really have a lot of organic waste or a lot of waste in general. And those were the majority of the exemptions.
Okay, so it's about size of waste that your business generates determines if you participate.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 26, with the costs, the certification costs, the registration fees and pre-certification fees, expedited review fee, and everything else, the certification fees. This is a lot of money. Where does this money go exactly? Does it go to the city? Does it go to the organization that's behind this certification?
It goes to the Green Building Council, from what I see. And the part of that is obviously they are the ones who are going to send out the auditors, if you will, the folks who do issue the certification, and they would be going through the records and so on. So, most of these third-party certifications, well, I should say all of them, that's the way they operate. You pay a fee, they send out their people.
Okay, and then the fines that the city might get, that would be levied, that comes from this group as well, and those $10,000 fines per day would be paid to this group, is that correct?
No, the $10,000, that information came from, there are two fines. There's a fine that is in the ordinance, which the city of Indio would issue to facilities or residents that don't comply with the rule. And then separate and apart from that, the city of Indio has a deliverable or duty to Cal Recycle. So if the city of Indio, and I don't know where I got that information from, Sarah, I don't know where the city's fines are documented. Is that in the DTSC? Is that in the Code of California regulation, Sarah?
Yes, it's actually in the 1383 legislation.
Okay, it's in the legislation. Okay.
So those fines would go where exactly, Sarah?
We would pay them to Cal Recycle.
Okay, all right. And then my last question is, and I'm all for the goal of zero waste, but we had discussions with Burtech a couple years ago when I first got on the commission that, and a question was posed to Burtech about that 70% of recycled goods end up in the landfill as it is anyways, regardless of going into the recycling bin or not, because there's no market for recycling materials. The cardboard market going to China dried up after the Great Recession in 2008. The only plastic items that of any recycling value are milk cartons and soda containers. So by the where, if you simply explain what happens to these recycling items that get separated, that we go to zero waste, does this actually work, or is this just something that sounds all great on paper, but in execution it doesn't work? If that makes sense.
Well,
I will tell you that this came up in our franchise negotiations because it is an issue, and we don't have a way of being 100% sure that everything is going where it's supposed to be, being processed and being handled the way it's supposed to be. But we did add into our franchise agreement with Burtech that they wouldn't take these anywhere where they're not processed and handled correctly. And in talking with them, I understand that most of their processing facilities are here in the United States. And most of what you're talking about happens when these things are shipped out of the country. And while I can't monitor where everything goes for sure, that Burtech is basically processing or sending things in the United States goes a long way to saying that at least what's coming from here is going where it's supposed to go and being handled correctly.
All right, thank you very much. That's all the questions I have. Commissioner Tack, the floor is yours for your questions.
Well, when we first discussed this, I thought we were sort of tentatively looking at a rolling out of this program without the true aspect of it, but rolling it out to get it in effect for about a year, get the containers all out, get everything marked and get it done, figuring out whether or not we're going to use countertop containers or bags to put the organics into the proper container. And then at that point, once we got to a certain level we were comfortable with, we could apply for the certification for true. Am I missing something, or is that, Sarah, is that sort of how we started?
I think that we were thinking about rolling it out kind of in conjunction with the 1383 rollout as it is, kind of together. So in other words, yes, you have to have these services. Yes, it will cost you more, but the city will help you as much as we can if you're interested in working toward this certification, which you can't get unless you literally show that you've reduced your waste by 90%. And there's a good chance that that will save you on costs for commercial. The idea behind this in my head was that we're trying to help the commercial because the cost for 1383 for the commercial side is pretty significant. And it's based on how much waste you're generating. The more waste, the more cost. And that this would be a way of trying to help them mitigate that cost increase. So we would roll it out as soon as possible.
Makes sense.
Commissioner Tack, do you have any other questions?
No, I don't, Morgan. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Chris, do you have any questions?
Sorry, I was going on mute. No, I don't. Madam Vice Chair Liu did an amazing job. Thank you so much for this. I really depended on her. I dropped the ball on this one. She really took the ball. It all seems self-explanatory to me.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else have any comments or questions, including those who made the presentation involved in it?
No, I would like to hear from our economic development attendee, and the last thing I would like for us to let me save my remarks until after we hear from him. Please go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on for this meeting. I've worked a little tiny bit in another community when we were kind of implementing this and rolling stuff out with businesses. And their major concern is there's a lot of confusion as to what's kind of what has to happen and what's going to happen. And then anything costs right away is red flags for any businesses, as you probably all aware. They just hear a dollar amount, or you say cost or anything, not even a dollar amount, and already they've stopped listening to what you're saying. And so that's the difficulty with this. And there's a little bit of a misunderstanding as to how this all works and how this affects them. So to me, it's just getting a good education piece that's very just clear cut, and maybe tying that to dollar amounts. Like, this is what needs to happen. And if it doesn't, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars. And then we as a city figure out the easiest, lowest way to get them to as minimal cost as possible.
My question on that is in terms of schedule. I understand the deadline for this is, the rollout is for January 2023, if I recall. That's when we plan to do the rollout. And we probably, because what you're saying there says to me that what we probably need to do to get over this confusion, and also part of the education, is perhaps use some examples. Because you can keep, talking at people, but if you use some examples, simple, very simple, sort of even pictorial examples, kind of like the pictures I have behind me, people like simple things. You get too funny, they just like, as you say, the eyes blur over. They don't have time for that. They got a business to run. So if you give them the example, typical facility, this size, this is going to be the cost. This is what you can do with your waste. That would take us, we're in October now almost. That might take us a couple of months to develop and develop something that could be put on the website, or a brochure, or something of that nature. I would think, and that's a question to yourself as, in economic development, how long have communications like that taken to develop?
So we work with our communications consultants, CV Strategies, and it would just depend on how long it would take for them to see what we already have and what they can already use to create. I don't have a timeline for you. It could be anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks, just depending on how intensive we want to get with it. But the next part is going to be the outreach, and that part, Sarah and I have been working with, even on a different project, trying to get that outreach to businesses and to get to the right person, right? Because if you go to a storefront or any type of business, you're going to get the gatekeeper and give you the runaround, and we can say, yeah, we dropped it off. But in order to get the message across, you have to be speaking to the right people.
I'd also like to add that we have had a lot of boots on the ground knocking on commercial facilities' doors and letting them know what's going on. CalRecycle focused on commercial compliance. And so there's been a lot of outreach toward commercial compliance, but it's been door to door, face to face, as much as we can do it. And because of that, and because of the, I don't want to say the lack or the putting off doing the residential outreach, because we're so focused on commercial, because that's what CalRecycle wanted for our compliance. And as Vice Chair Liu said, we face hefty charges to miss compliance deadlines. So there has actually been a lot of outreach to commercial facilities. The residential is just now beginning to ramp up, but the commercial facilities are aware. Every single commercial facility in Indio that will need to do this has actually talked to someone either from Burtech or from a consultant that the city hired outside of Burtech to let them know that this was happening, deadlines. Once everything is rolled out, Burtech goes out, makes sure, and then connects again to say, do you need training? Do you need posters? Do you need that? So the commercial facility outreach has actually been pretty robust. It just doesn't feel like it because we haven't focused nearly as much on the residential because we were just trying to stay one step ahead of Cal Recycle.
Okay.
All right, cool. So it might take, it probably takes as long as it takes. It might lag a little bit behind the 1383 full rollout. But my other question with this is with regards to the other suggestions that are being made here, such as provide incentives, because if you're going to tell people about cost, I just, I guess I looked at it from a business perspective. Why in the world would I want to incur costs if there's like zero benefit to me? I mean, for me, it just doesn't even make sense. You're not, maybe I'm a pessimist. I just think it's a better way to encourage them. How would you be able to, or when would you be able to give us some feedback on that, Sarah, as to whether we can give them some benefits or whether we can also have a second tier? I think this goes to what Commissioner Benson is saying about we're not just doing true alone. Can we have some other alternatives thrown in there?
I'd be happy to look into that. I know that we do have the AB 939 funds, and I think I'm almost positive that we can help the cost to get this certification. So they won't have to pay out of pocket these fees that you show here. The city can help with that, and then we may consider targeting the higher rate facilities first, because that should also save them money on their waste bill. And then as far as the other incentives, those are going to be a little trickier. I'll have to work through those and talk with some folks here in Indio, and I'll see if I can come up with some options for you at the next meeting.
Yeah, and I would also like to see perhaps the city saying we are going to give you a consultant out of those funds. We're going to give you a consultant for one day because each facility is going to be specific. I don't anticipate that we're going to have hundreds of facilities. I mean, it's a small pool. So if we paid a consultant to put together, I don't know how many days of work it would take for a consultant to just kind of put together some initial analysis per facility. That to me is the biggest hurdle. Because if we don't do that, then that means that they would have to go hire a consultant themselves to even figure out if they want to be in the program. So that to me is where the facility, if we can, I don't know if we can afford that.
I'll look into it. I will definitely come back with some answers for you at the next meeting.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Vice Chair Liu, for your presentation and your the slideshow that you submitted. It's fantastic. So let's have everyone take a look at that over the next few weeks and have your questions and comments prepared for the next meeting. Perhaps, is it helpful if we have comments and questions and send them before the meeting, and that way they can be answered straight away and not get too drawn out into a lot of back and forth? Is that helpful, or no? Do you want to wait till the actual meeting?
No, I think that would be helpful. It's a good idea.
All right, so if you can send them in ahead of time, and then maybe they can be addressed right away, and we can knock this out, and maybe next month we can put it to a motion and go from there.
Forgive me, Chairman. Sarah, is it reasonable to ask you to be able to provide us before next meeting with what the city can provide as far as financial help for these businesses?
Yeah, I'll do my best to get that to you ahead of time.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, we'll move on to item 7 on the agenda, grants. And 7.1, Transformative Climate Communities Grant Application Update. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. For the TCC grant, we have finalized the application. The Strategic Growth Council came out to do a site visit. You were here on August 25th. I think that went really well. Again, this is a $35 million grant for sidewalks in the Jewel community, putting down fiber for super fast internet, adding community gardens and solar on the residential and multi-family properties, just as some of the highlights of what we would do with this grant. And we should have more information whether or not we'll get funded sometime in October, at least a preliminary recommendation from the Strategic Growth Council. That's all I have for that.
All right, thank you. One quick question. Is that 35 million that the city of Indio would get, or we get a piece of that? Is that is the grant total and they divvy it up, or?
That's the grant total. And in fact, we had to match quite a bit of it. So I forget, it's something like a $75 million grant at the end of it, because we matched some of it. We pulled in resources or leverage resources from other grants, including the Clean California grant. So at the end of the day, it's a huge grant. It's much more than 35 million.
But all right. So, but it's not 35 million that other communities put in their hat into the ring and it gets divvied up. We would, if we win the grant, we would get 35 million plus whatever else that the city does.
That's correct.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions regarding that?
Yes, I'm sorry, Sarah. You said 35 million, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? All right, if nobody else has any questions, we'll go to 7.2, the Clean California Grant Update. Sarah, floor is still yours.
Okay, and for this one, our next event, the Clean California Grant is putting in the artistic shade structures and sidewalks along Jackson Street, trying to liven up that portion of Jackson Street between Kenner and Avenue 45. Part of that grant also is holding cleanup events, doing a kickoff event, and kind of rallying people around cleaning the area as well. And we have the date for the kickoff event. It's going to be November 12th from 9 until noon. If that stretch of street is a lot of commercial. So we're trying to figure out, we're going to bring out volunteers. We're definitely going to do litter cleanup because it is partially a clean street litter cleanup type grant. We will also be looking for projects. So we're going to bring the graffiti truck out and they'll work on private property, commercial properties, signs, anything that's out there. So they'll be out there on that day. The city will be out there. Any sign that's ours, there's a couple that could use replacing. There's some that are leaning over, could be spiced up a bit or just fixed outright. So we'll be out there doing that as well. And we're trying to figure out some projects to do with the volunteers. We're really looking at some of the wheel stops along some of that area that bumps up against the sidewalks because they're made of concrete. They're not just fading, but they're literally crumbling. We do have funding to purchase new wheel stops that would be made of recycled tires and recycled plastics. But that may be something we consider as well. And we're going to be talking to the commercial facilities because I want to get them involved. So it's not just the community out there cleaning. I'd like to ask them, at a minimum to allow the volunteers to use their restrooms or fill up water bottles in their facilities. If they would come out and clean their areas, if they have a parking lot or something, they can be sweeping that during the time. And then there's some broken down signs as well, maybe get a commitment from them to go ahead and start looking at replacing some of those signs and doing things on their end as well. So that's where we are with that. November 12th, there'll be more information soon.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions?
No question, just comment. Sarah, I think it's absolutely amazing to get the community partners involved in investing in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments or questions? All right.
I'm sorry, I do have one question on the Transformative Climate Communities grants. I'm assuming that something is going to be released on the website, correct?
On our website?
Yes.
If we get funded, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. All right, if nobody else has any comments or questions, we'll move on to item 8, commissioner comments. Any commissioners have any comments?
I do have one comment. I would like us to perhaps at the next meeting or the meeting after, sometime before the end of the year, return to our schedule for the sustainability plan. We didn't call it a schedule, we called it something else. But our working plan for that, just to see, kind of gauge our progress, where we are, what we've done, are we moving fast enough? So that's my request, suggestion, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll bring that up on a future agenda soon.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments?
My only comment, if I may, is again, Vice Chair Liu, your attention to detail is second to none. I applaud you. Thank you so much. You are appreciated. You are a rare breed, and we are valuable. We are lucky to have you.
Well, you're very welcome. We all bring something to the table that is unique. Hopefully we don't duplicate each other fully, but we all bring something a little bit different. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else have any comments? If not, we'll move on to item 9, staff items. Sarah, the floor is yours again.
I have no items. Thank you.
All right, thank you. If there's no staff items, then I will motion to adjourn this meeting at 6:47 p.m. Is there a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second that.
All right, thank you. All in favor? I vote. Oh, sorry, Sarah, you can do the vote count. It's all right.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry. Do we need to vote on this to adjourn it?
Adjourn.
You can just do it.
All right, so we're at 6:48 p.m. We're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Safe
Thank
and
you.
stay out of
Thanks so
trouble.
much.
Yeah,
And please
thank you.
remember to submit your comments and questions
Yeah.
ahead of time next meeting.
Thank you. Bye-bye.